Hi and welcome to the Metaphysical Film School. I'm Chris Sheridan, and today's video is going to be a discussion on three-act story structure. Okay, well, let's get a timeline. This will be the linear time from beginning to end that our story takes place. And if this is the beginning here on the left, and this is the end, we're going to have act breaks at about here and here. Now, Hollywood calls these acts Act 1, Act 2, and you guessed it, Act 3 over here. And essentially what we have is the beginning, and we have the middle, and then of course we have the end here at the end. So, no surprise there. We're going to take a little bit deeper look into this and just see what that means to have this Act 1, 2, and 3, beginning, middle, and end. And before we get into that, though, let's see about how much time we're going to spend on each act. That is, how long the story is going to be or how long the movie is going to last. So, in a 2-hour movie or 120 minutes, your first act will be about 30 minutes and about 60 minutes or an hour for Act 2, and then another 30 for Act 3. Now, if the movie's not 2 hours, a lot of them are shorter, some of them are longer. We would consider a percentage, so maybe 25% for Act 1, 50% of the screen time in Act 2, and another 25, which equals 100 at the end. Okay, well, now we know how long they are and what they're called and which one takes place first and which one takes place last, but that really doesn't help us a whole lot. So, let's look at these acts, first of all, from a mythological viewpoint. And this mythologist is Joseph Campbell. You've probably heard of before. Maybe you've read his Power of Myth book or seen the videos. And he came up with this monomyth, which he called the hero's journey. I'm sure you've probably heard that before. Well, who is this hero? Well, the hero is the main character of your story, or the movie that we want to watch. It can be a girl, it can be a guy. It can also be somebody unlikable, like an anti-hero. But either way, this is the person that is mostly, that the story is mostly about, and the one through whose eyes we follow as we watch the movie or read the story. Okay, so he also uses, Campbell also uses 3 distinct sections or stages of this hero's journey, and we'll follow along with 1, 2, and 3, and he called them, starting with the first one, departure, and the second act, initiation, and the return for Act 3. Okay, well, what do these mean? Let's take a look. Okay, so departure, first of all. Well, you have to be somewhere before you can depart from somewhere. And this is generally the hero's home world. And it's what he knows. It's the known world. He knows how to act, he knows what to do, but something happens, either brought about by the character or circumstances or the situation calls for it. And speaking of call, it's called the call to adventure. And this call to adventure is initially refused by the hero, but eventually comes around and has to leave this home world. And that's where the adventure will take place here in the middle and the final act. So he has to leave the home world, and that is the departure. So usually in this first act we'll see the hero and what he's doing and how he knows how to work himself and how to work the world that he lives in, but he's called to something greater than himself. So he has to leave, and he moves on over to the initiation stage. And here he will meet all kinds of crazy characters, usually a mentor. There will be tests and trials. And this is where the hero learns a new way. The old way doesn't work as much. The skills that he had in the first act aren't going to help him too much in the second act, because he has to learn new things. He has to become greater than he is to achieve this goal. So as he does, and he will be trained usually by an older character, wiser, called the mentor, which means other parent, actually, if you look it up. And at some point, this mentor, after imparting all this wisdom, has to get out of the way or has to die. Sometimes it's a physical kind of thing at this stage of the journey called appointment with death. Now, this is not usually the death of the main character, because the movie would be over at this point. But there is something that happens. A lot of times it is the mentor who dies. And symbolically what this means is now that the student, this hero, after having learned from the mentor, must stand on his own 2 feet. And one of the best ways, maybe not the best for the mentor, but the best way is to completely get out of the way, and death is, we know this from Obi-Wan Kenobi and other characters, mentor characters, because the hero has to act on his own now. But with this appointment with death comes an unusual, sometimes a supernatural experience where he must face his own life and his own death at a point where he has to surrender. And at this surrender, usually that's when all hope is lost. And the hero feels like giving up and may quit. But through this quitting, through this giving up, it's actually a very powerful part, because what happens is the hero really gives up completely his former self and gives in to this new way. And only by completely getting out of the way, this is like the death of the ego in psychology, only by completely getting out of the way of himself is he then able to move forward and continue on the journey to the return. Now, like the initial call to adventure, the return is also met with an initial refusal. Because now this has become the new world, and he knows how to operate in this world. And there's an initial hesitation, but usually that doesn't last too long, and he can get on with it. And this, in the final act, you would have a final battle or some other kind of conflict. If it's a love story, this would be when there's a chance to save the relationship, or if it's a sports-oriented story, then this would be the championship game, or whatever has to happen at the end. And what does happen is the hero brings everything together that he's learned along the way and applies it. And not only that, also doesn't bring in these things that he had in the past. He's able to let go of them and also pick up the new things and bring them, and then we have a final resolution. Okay, so I hope this helps, and this is a 3-act structure using the hero's journey. We'll be back again for more.